Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us again. This is PropTalk, a property management podcast that is powered by Resman. I'm Elizabeth Francisco, and I'm the Chief Experience Officer at Inhabit IQ, and I'm also part of Resman's executive leadership team. And on today's episode of Trailblazers in Multifamily, I am joined by my very special friend, Carol Enoch. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's going to be a good one, too. Let me tell you guys a little bit about how Carol and I met and why I begged and pleaded her to come on the show. So I met Carol at an NMHC event. Shout out to NMHC for doing such a great job with supporting women in the industry. Yes. And we were at a summit in California. And I was really, I think we met the night before at the happy hour and the gathering. And I was just so blown away in our conversation about your level of expertise, energy, your passion for the real estate, for real estate management, but also like just how open and welcoming you were as just in general a human being.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it was warm and fuzzy for me, and even into like investing and entrepreneurship. You're quite something, my friend. And,
I appreciate that.
Well, I'm going to make you blush. I can see your cheeks. Her cheeks just went pink. So you're also an industry veteran, although I think I pretty much have a couple of good years on you in that regard. But I also love that you're not just a successful entrepreneur once, you're simultaneously doing it twice.
Yeah, whose idea was that? Why have one business when you can have two or more?
I was going to say, I'm in awe of that. And actually, if I think back to our own history at Resman, I guess we have that in common because of how we built Resman to begin with, which was simultaneously while running our management company. So I think we have a lot of things in common. And maybe we were on the same journey at different points of the journey.
I hope so, because I need some guidance. So I can't wait to talk about what we're doing, learn about what you did. Because I think for me, it's funny because you say trailblazer, but I feel so fortunate to work with so many amazing individuals that I can look at and ask them questions and find out where they've gone and how we can work together. And so I feel incredibly supported by our industry in general, which makes this super fun.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear you say that because I have leaned on the industry, and I love that about our industry. I have friends outside our space, and I don't know that all industries. I mean, there's a lot of really good giving people out in the world, but I think there's something special about the multifamily space because when I bring friends into the environment, they're very quick to point out, oh, it's not like that in our space. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that, and I think that's an important thing for us to acknowledge. And I think you and I are both kind of on that same path about wanting to do that for other people and to be part of support and mentoring and just giving back because so many people have helped us in our career.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And for me, it feels like collaboration, right? I've done none of this on my own. I look around and I see people, and I think one of my superpowers is seeing the best in folks and bringing out things in them that they don't see in themselves, and putting all that together to make something unique and fun and beautiful.
See, just make... Can y'all see that? I'm doing the heart thing. Because that's just, I feel the exact same way. And I think the challenge we're going to have on today's, there's episode 1, episode 2, there might be episode 3, because there's just so much to talk about. And I think we're very much kindred spirits. So, I really did. As I mentioned, I really had a phenomenal conversation. In fact, I probably did what you're not supposed to do in networking, which is like latch on and just stay with you for most of that networking event. But I feel like my time was so well spent. And I remember thinking in the moment, I don't know if I brought it up right then, but I was like, I wanted other people to have that same experience. And so that's really what led me to talking to Megan about bringing you on PropTalk with us.
Wow. Thank you.
So, but to get us started, because I know some of the history, I think it would be great if you could just take a few minutes and just kind of talk me through, your history in multifamily.
Yeah, I would love to. So I think like a lot of us, I ended up in multifamily real estate on accident. My background is in theater. I'm a classically trained actress. I moved to Chicago right after college and was looking for a day job to pay the bills. And I answered an ad in the Chicago Reader in the free newspaper that I picked up at the corner store, because that's how we did things back then.
It was on paper, people, for our younger viewers.
That's right. And it was, I think you had less characters than Twitter in your ads. I think it was, like a sentence and a half. And so this ad
Oh
was
my gosh, that's right.
Yeah, we had to be very succinct. So the ad was for a job. I don't even know that it said it was a leasing agent, but it was like, are you creative? Do you need a flexible schedule that has a good financial, package? And I was like, yeah, that sounds perfect, because I needed something to do while I was starting my theater company and starting my theater career. And so it said fax your resume to 773-252-6105 or whatever the fax number was. And again, I went to theater school, so I'd never faxed anything in my life. My roommate at the time, thankfully, was a communications major, and her dad had set up a computer for us in our apartment. And she goes, oh, you can use WinFax. You just take your Word document and you fax it from there. And so I faxed it, and I didn't see anything happen, so I sent it again. I accidentally faxed my resume 17 times to this company, and I was worried it didn't get there. So I went to the library, and I did some research, and I found the name of the company, and I got my resume ready to mail. And I realized it was half mile from my house. And I was like, I'll just walk this down as well.
Gosh. So I'll step back for a second. So you have 17 emails.
17 faxes.
Or 17, yeah. That shows you how much technology. Yeah. I can't even say those words anymore. But 17 faxes to this organization that doesn't know who you are.
Yes.
And now you're on your way there in person.
I have dropped off a manila envelope in the mail, and I'm on my way there in person to hand deliver it as well. Oh my God. They called me in for an interview instead of filing a restraining order. I don't know if they have feelings about which choice they made, and hired me on the spot.
Oh, wow.
Because they figured the chances of me being a lunatic, moderate. The chances of me being really good at follow-up and closing some deals for them, because it's a commission-only role, high.
Yep.
So
nailed it.
Totally nailed it. And so I ended up, quite frankly, finding two careers that I absolutely love. And I could take you through every step of the journey, and I don't know if that's necessary or not. But what I can tell you is that I look at real estate and my role in multifamily as an honor. We work where people live. Throughout the course of my career, I have helped people get engaged. I have been the first person that they've seen after they've lost a job or found out they're getting divorced. I've helped people organize furniture in their apartment to get ready for their new baby. We've been a part of intimate moments in people's lives in a way that a lot of other industries don't necessarily have the opportunity to experience. It's really beautiful. It also encapsulates something that's incredibly important to me, especially as a woman who's trained in the arts, which is investment and planning for your future. When you're somebody who appreciates being in the moment and bringing beauty to life, sometimes we forget about planning for the future, right? And so understanding how to make money work is something that's really important to me. And so being able to be a part of that throughout my career has been really critical.
So what was your career journey like as far as coming in? Did you come as a leasing agent?
I came in as a leasing agent.
Okay. And about how many years was it from started coming in the industry to maybe your first real leadership role?
Oh, gosh. I mean, how are we defining leadership, right? And I do want to talk about that, because I think every role is a leadership role. I think every single person on this planet has an opportunity to lead. And in my opinion, in the way that I operated then and the way that I operate now, I don't see a difference between hierarchy and roles. I will speak to a CEO in the same tone, fashion, and respect that I will speak to an entry-level person on my Porter team, because they are professionals that are doing their job and they're coming to work every day. Yeah. So respect is given until I've seen a tremendous amount of evidence to the contrary. I tend to have a pretty wide threshold as far as that's concerned. So, in terms of major leadership role, I would say it happened pretty quickly at my first company. And I don't know that I would have considered it a leadership role per se in the moment, but I certainly do now. I started out as a leasing agent. We were paid on commission. This is before the internet was used widely for advertising. And so our company's job was to be a hub where a consumer could come and say, I want to rent an apartment in the Wicker Park, Bucktown neighborhood of Chicago, and I'm going to go to North Clybourne Group, and they're going to drive me around, show me these apartments, help me pick out my home. Okay. And that's what we did. So I ended up almost getting fired twice. Thank you, Karen Bialzar, for not firing me. We were worked on commission, and we had 5 phone lines in the office. So you had to keep the calls moving to make money. So we would have owners that would call and want to understand Why is my apartment not rented? Is the pricing okay?
Mm.
But we were not making money in our minds. We made money when the customer
Right.
rented an apartment. So we were not actually being very client focused.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on a phone with an angry owner for 20 minutes. Phone's ringing. Nobody's there to pick it up. Office manager's like, wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a talker. I'm keeping talking. She's like, Carol, you've got to get off the phone. And I'm like, Carol Ann, I can't. Like, he's mad. Owner of the company walks out. Well, she and I are having this whisper fight
Okay.
across the office. And she's like, Carol, my office now. I'm like, I'm getting fired. I'm getting fired. I'm getting fired. I'm getting fired. What happened? We explained. And she goes, you know what? You both have a point. And we've got an area of opportunity in our business. Our clients are not getting the care that they need. So they created a role for me called the listing manager. So my job became taking care of the clients. So instead of making commission on the leases that I signed with a customer, I made a percentage of the commission of everyone's lease.
Okay.
So my very fancy job was to do basic things like run around and test the keys to make sure that they worked. Make sure that the listings were correct. Take pictures, take measurements, write the ads, fax them, or hand deliver them to the Chicago reader. And make sure that the clients understood how are their properties performing? What were we seeing happen with our other 1,100 listings that we had? Because again, we didn't have CoStar. We don't have access to major market data. So we're pulling individual pieces of information and doing that. So I would say that was probably my first leadership role and, less than a year into the industry.
Yeah. Well, and what a fortunate opportunity. And I think that's what's probably really my guess. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you look at a lot of things in life as an opportunity.
Everything.
Yeah. Because that you seized that opportunity.
Yes.
Why do you think what is it within you that, because not everyone can be in that moment and seize an opportunity like that or even recognize it at the time. So what do you think puts you in a position to do that? Or has, because you continue to do that to this day.
I do continue to do that. And I will say that it's really hard for me to answer that question because it's so naturally innate and feels so naturally innate to who I am. I didn't even realize that was a superpower until recently. And even saying it out loud, it still isn't 100% cogent in my brain. But here's what I will tell you, that having training in the arts helps you to see things in a different way. And that even though this is a skill set that's natural to me, it's also something that I've honed and practiced. So in my training as an actress, if I'm presented with a script, words on a page, my job is to make that come to life, which means I'm looking at subtext. I'm looking at history. I'm looking at context. I'm looking at the other person who's in the scene or other people who are in the scene. I've got to look at a lot of different things. And you do that a lot. And it gets easier and easier and easier. And then you can take on more and look at more things. And so I do not in any way want to present the idea that this is something that is a 100% natural, you're absolutely born with this or you're not. I do think it's a skill set that can be honed and learned and practiced.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to, and we're probably diving into different areas. I didn't mean if I caught you off guard with that one, but
no, I love it.
I love where you were going with that. And I think I do agree. I think people can learn and people can continue to grow. And getting into that mindset of recognizing opportunities can be so impactful to helping you achieve whatever your goals may be in life. So,
yes.
But I never would have thought about it in the terms of learning through theater. Because in my world, when I was coming up through high school and college, I was a kind of a science nerd. And so for me, it was all about the scientific theory and practice and methodology.
But it's not that different.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm sitting here thinking about as you're saying that is, you're right. They're very similar. And it's all about assessing information.
Yes.
And
my mother's a theoretical algebra professor. My dad is an actuary. I grew up in a household with two mathematicians. But this process of research, testing, learning, it's quite similar. And I would say that there's an art to the scientific method, and I would say that there's science behind a process as well.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think you're exactly right. You know, I know what it takes to start a company. And I think what I'm curious about from your own background is, what did it look like for you to, come up through, because I know your background. I know some of the companies you've worked for, some pretty big names in our industry. But when did you start to realize or think about kind of breaking out and doing your own thing, being your own entrepreneur, becoming the CEO of your own universe?
I didn't. And I sometimes still don't. So this is what I think is super fascinating. It's not, and look, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs that have a very different journey.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a conscious choice for me. I am someone who, subtlety is not my strong suit. And so I require clear messaging from my friends, family, partners, and the universe. And so typically when I am learning something, karma, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is holding up gigantic neon road signs like, Carol, this way. And I'm like, you know what? I feel pretty good over here. So I'm going to keep rolling. And they're like, no, seriously, this way. And I'm like, that's cute, but I'm super cozy. And they're like, no, really, over here. So I kept hitting roadblocks. I kept hitting areas of discomfort. I kept hitting areas where internally I was not feeling aligned with what I was doing. I was not feeling aligned with the people that I was surrounding myself with professionally. I wasn't feeling, actually, that's not totally true. But there was friction. There was friction where there didn't need to be friction. And I kept pushing up against this feeling that something wasn't quite right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working for a good friend of mine who I respect tremendously. I'd been brought on as the VP, the second in command of a growing company. And pretty early on in the process, we realized that it wasn't exactly the right fit. I saw a lot of things in the company. I'm a very analytical person. I tend to take a high level view first and then start digging into the weeds to figure out what could be done differently, better. And so we're having these conversations, and I realized within the first couple of months that, and I actually told this person this, I was like, I think you meant to hire like 2 mid-career range development managers. And like, I think there's a ton that I could do for your company, but we had overlapping skill sets. What I was doing and what he was doing were very similar. And it was his company, and he needed to just do that. So we were able to have these sometimes uncomfortable, but very honest conversations with each other, and ended up doing a workout plan. And they were my first client.
Oh.
He was like, as we work this out, he's like, what if you consult for a couple months? And I was like, that sounds great, because I'm a huge fan of the company. I want them to do well. They're a huge fan of me, want me to do well. And it wasn't until we were in it that we realized that it wasn't meant to be. The me of 5 years ago, the people-pleasing me, the me that was very concerned about my reputation and what everybody thought of me, would have said what I needed to say, stayed in the job for at least 2 years. But I'd hired an executive coach when I got the leadership role, because I wanted that mentorship and support. And through working with her, really got clear on what I wanted, how I wanted to be. And it changed my communication style. It changed my confidence. And quite frankly, if I had done what the people-pleasing me wanted to do, I could have easily burned that bridge. And instead, I have a very strong ally and partner in this group. And so this happens. A friend of mine that I'd been giving some just, kind of sideline advice to, their family owns some properties in San Diego. Over the years, he'd call me and say, hey, I've got a question, having trouble with my property management company, want to be respectful of your time. I call Charlie and I say, hey, man, I'm going to start consulting full time in January. So I'm going to have extra time if there's anything I can help you with. And I'm sitting outside. I had a doctor's appointment. I had the spiral bound notebook and a pencil, like I'm in second grade.
Okay.
I'm on the phone with him, and I'm just writing down what he's saying. So I built out my scope of work on, a little 9-rule, whatever, spiral bound notebook, and had 2 clients within 48 hours of exiting this role that, quite frankly, I felt like I worked really hard to get to that place, to have that executive leadership role. And I was really self-conscious about it. I was very self-conscious about starting my own company, very self-conscious about, was I there too short of a time period? Is it going to look bad? And I talked to some colleagues that I trust to kind of, just roll the idea past them of a consulting firm. And one in particular, Rich Wilson, who is my development manager at Forum Investment Group when I worked there in Denver, he was like, that makes perfect sense. He's like, you take a consultative approach to everything. Like, this is 100% in line. And I got that feedback a number of times. And So what people that knew me saw in myself, I'm more comfortable with it now,
Yeah.
but especially
It's
at the
hard to see it
beginning, very hard to see.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for me to be vulnerable about that fact. I think it's important to know that everybody has a different viewpoint. I know some entrepreneurs that their journey was, I had this vision, I had this goal, I needed to go for it. And I think that's amazing. This happened more organically for me. And in a way just feels like the right thing to do.
Well, and as we continue to just build our friendship, that's amazing to me how many parallels we have. Because you probably don't, I don't know that we ever talked about the background story of Rusman, but I had no intentions of, I didn't know I was even starting a software company. We actually built it in-house for our own management company. And then because people in the industry got wind of it, we were encouraged to take it to market. And so we did testing while we were still running our management company. And, before I knew it, I was, having to make a distinction and a decision between you can't be both. And that's actually what I found is it was hard for me to maintain those types of businesses, even though they did complement one another, but to take on a software company was such a huge endeavor. But in the moment, I didn't even really, we didn't do the discovery. We didn't assess the market, none of that. So a lot of that was lessons learned along the way. So that's just another reason why I love you. So, I was thinking about while you were talking about your executive coach and how your communication style changed. And and it's funny that radical candor was just popping up in my head while you were talking about going and sitting down and having what could have been I don't know if it was comfortable or uncomfortable for you in the moment, but going back and saying maybe this isn't a right fit, or let's come together, let's be open and transparent about what's working and what's not. And I see that in people that reach out to me. I mean, I can tell you in my past, I've struggled with that because I'm a people pleaser, just like you. And, I've learned that doesn't serve either party very well.
That's right.
But what do you think, what was it is there any advice you have for somebody who's struggling with that? Maybe that lessons learned from your executive coach or just your own experience? Like if you were mentoring somebody today that's facing that, what advice would you give them if they're still stuck in people pleaser mode? Like, how do you break out of it?
The first thing that I will say is that I wouldn't give them advice, because if they're in people pleasing mode, they need to think for themselves, and they need to get real clear and real grounded on what it is that they want and they need to be selfish.
Well, maybe that's part of it. Well, I don't think maybe it is. I think that you just hit that nail on the head. And the reason why I'm asking this is I think about when I'm out at shows and events, and I just hear so many conversations, and I hear this part of it. I know people who are in this place, they're in roles where it's not the right fit, or they're sharing outside of the organization where there's problems or challenges. And so I'm, just thinking, because next time I get asked this question, I want to, make sure I think about the best answers. And I think what you just said, I think was really impactful about get selfish. But depending how you were raised, and specifically for us women, I think more so than our male counterparts, that is such a taboo, at least for certain generations. I don't know, maybe our younger generations behind us is prevalent, but I know in my household, that's like that's bad. And, young ladies shouldn't be selfish. I mean, that's a terrible character.
That's right. And I'm thrilled that I chose to use the word selfish in that moment, because I think that we have a negative stigma around it, and I like to take that back. Because I will tell you, since I got selfish, and when I made a huge transition, Elizabeth, I moved to California, from Denver, a place that I had left before. I left the Bay Area. It was too expensive. I was stressed out. I had an amazing opportunity in Denver, but I left a relationship. I, was dating somebody in San Francisco. We transitioned to a long distance relationship while I was in Denver. It was very stressful. Took a job back in San Francisco during COVID, having relationship challenges, having job challenges. I mean, everything felt incredibly heavy. And I was trying to please my boyfriend. I was trying to please my boss. I, at no point, had stopped to figure out what is it that I actually want to do. And so I reached a crossroads, and I raised my hand and asked for help. I had an executive coach that I had hired that I've been working with for quite some time. I have a therapist that I was talking to. I hired another executive coach that specializes in big transitions, and we had a very specific piece of my life and my career that we were working on. And I have a girlfriend who's a healer who does manifestation work, and I started working with her. So I kept joking with my friends.
A lot of investment in self.
A lot of investment in self. I kept joking that I had a staff. And so this was right after, I ended this job that, and I know that I painted a good picture of it, and I think ultimately it was good. It was still hard in the moment. Intellectually, my ego still says, ooh, that didn't work out. That didn't happen how I thought it would. I broke up with my boyfriend of almost 5 years. That was a really big deal in my early 40s to end a relationship that I thought was moving towards marriage and family and all of these things. And to say, in my heart of hearts, I know this isn't where this is going. And if this is what I want, I've got to stop and walk away. And I hired a staff. And I remember having a conversation with my executive coach, with Kate, and saying, I just feel so bad that I have all these resources that I'm pulling on. I'm paying all of them, by the way, so I'm not pulling on them. But in my mind, I'm taking. And she goes, okay, Carol, break down for me what this looks like. She's like, I know you and I see each other at the time once a week for an hour. She knew that I had this other coach that I was working with, and I think we were on schedule for, 2 hours a week, but for 6 weeks, short period of time. And my therapist for 1 hour a week. And then I have my manifestation work for 1 hour a week. So she's like, that's 4 hours out of the week. And my mind was blown. I thought that spending 4 hours out of
I know where this is going.
a week was the most selfish, horrifyingly terrible thing I'd ever done. Spend 4 hours a week on yourself. It is 100% worth it. And here's what's true. Since I did that, communication style changed, attitude changed. I am now a much more fulfilled, happy, grounded person. And I am giving back in a higher quality way to my friends, my family, my clients, my industry, and myself.
Yeah, your better self. You're bringing your best self forward.
Yes.
I love that. I'm glad we went there. We didn't plan on going there, but I'm glad we went and talked about that. And I think, I know in our audience, we have all levels in multifamily. And, myself, my story was single mom coming up, very limited resources. So the only thing I would add to what you said is, if you're not in a financial position to hire coaches, because especially now with inflation and potential recession, 4 hours a week, and you can still spend 4 hours on investment on yourself because of the internet. You can Google a lot. There's amazing TED Talks, and I love that you've put that time around it, designating it. So my advice would be to think about that. What's important to you? What are you struggling with? Google it. I hate that I just gave a shameless plug for Google, but I did. So
you could Bing it if you wanted to, if you're that kind of person. But here's what I want to say. Don't think that you can't afford a coach, because everybody that I work with works on a sliding scale.
Oh.
So I was not working at the time that I was doing this, right? I guess I technically started my company and I had 2 clients. So I was working. Sorry, guys. But I didn't have a full-time job. I was very much in a pause moment. And I was offered sliding scale pricing from all of them.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
So what I would also say in addition to Google is don't be afraid to ask.
Okay.
Because think about this from a business perspective. Let's say I'm running a coaching business and I've got a ton of folks out there that can afford my $6,000 a month fee, right? My executive leadership fee. That's what percentage of the population? 2%, 3%, 4%? I have no idea. Small percent. So that's a limited source of business. If I take somebody who is growing and it's early in their career and doesn't have those financial resources, I have a sliding scale. They get hooked. I am going to help them make more money.
Right.
And they are going to pay me more. So if you're somebody out there who thinks I'm not worth it, I can't. No, Tell that voice to sit down. Thank you for their input. They're trying to protect you. Give them a snack and go call a coach and ask if they have a sliding scale.
Yeah, that's great advice, because I can tell you, I have not worked with an executive coach. I have had the benefit of our private equity backers investing in me and helping me. But at the times where I was trying to find one for myself, it was a very hefty fixed price. And for somebody that was young with 2 kids by themselves, at the time that was gas. And when I was coming up through the ranks, we didn't have, like I said, the internet wasn't a thing yet. I mean, maybe about 2 years in, we had AOL dial up.
Yeah.
So there's just so many more resources available. But I love that you just shared that, because I honestly didn't know that either, that there was flexibility, because the ones that I had reached out to, there wasn't. So you just keep asking.
That's right. And I'll be very transparent. I have some of those resources were as low as $100 an hour, and some were as high as $500 an hour.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And there's a lot of resources that are out there, and it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yes. Well, great advice. So I'm glad that we went there. Kind of thinking back to, because I did want to dive into this, and I maybe from the roles that you've had, I don't know, this may be a relevant question, but I just keep thinking about starting a business, and as you get into it, and I'm curious about what were your maybe expectations going in, and how do they align in the reality?
Okay, so I'm going to not answer your question first so that I can answer your question. The first thing that I want to say is that because of my experience, and I do want to go back a little bit through the resume so that people understand where I came from and can maybe find some connection points in their multifamily career. So I started out as a leasing agent. Then I moved over. One of our clients had a small property management company. They wanted to bring leasing in-house. So they hired me. I helped them build out their leasing department, and I started learning property management. Then we had a really fabulous recession, thanks to the mortgage industry. And I worked at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for a year. So it's bad when you work at art school, because there's nothing good in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually a phenomenal experience. After that, I started working for Magellan Development, which is a really phenomenal development group based in Chicago. Family-owned company, definitely institutional. They developed the whole Lakeshore East complex there. They're now developing in Minnesota, Texas, nationwide. Phenomenal group of people. And that was my first big lease up. So I was leasing director of this 329-unit building in the South Loop. I had an asset manager who really took me under his wing and answered every question that I had, told me how to read pro formas, helped me understand if I raised rent $10 a month, how that impacted cap rates. Really mentored me. So thank you, Seth, for that. And then got moved to Philadelphia with John Buck Company to do a large lease up as the general manager there. Moved to San Francisco with UDR doing their flagship lease up at 399 Fremont, 447 unit high rise in downtown San Francisco. So what I want to say, and the reason that I got hired as an asset manager, asset managing a group of lease ups for Forum Investment Group, and then moved on to be VP at Align Residential in San Francisco. So lots of stair steps.
Yeah.
When you're a business manager at a building, you are running a business. You are running a full P&L business. And so I don't want to gloss over the fact that when I stepped into running my own company, it felt a little bit just like starting jogging after you've walked for a couple of miles, because I had that experience from the industry of running a true business. And I had people that trusted me and took time to share with me insights that helped me understand high level how what I was doing on a daily basis impacted the bottom line. So I think that's super critical.
And I'm glad you took a moment to go back and talk about that, because I think that is in our industry, when people coming up through the ranks, I think I started to realize that pretty quickly. I had very good fortune to have a lot of people invest in me, but I asked a lot of questions.
Same.
So I would point that out, and I didn't doubt that about us. We're both very curious, but we want to know why, and because we analyze, we want to be better, and we need data, and we need to understand how to do that. But I love that you said about running the business, because I think we know that, but if somebody's out there considering breaking out on their own or doing something or starting their own business, and they're in multifamily and they've come up through property management, they know a lot about running a business.
That's right.
They just may not realize it in that context.
That's right.
So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I want to touch on is moving from leasing into management. At the time that I did it, that was not normal. They were still hiring managers from accounting. Remember that time? Right?
Wow.
Because the business managers at a building were they were processing invoices, processing rent. So this was an unusual move to have a leasing manager go over to be a general manager. And one of the reasons I was able to do it is because I was working in the lease up space. So here's what I want to say, and we've changed how we're doing things in the industry in a way that I think is phenomenal, because you know what those leasing and marketing folks understand? Top line revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how you can impact your business in the most positive way?
Mm-hmm.
Top line revenue. You can always make more money. Expenses are going to be expenses.
Yeah.
Are there creative ways that you can pull them down? Sure. But if you really want to impact your business, your leasing and marketing are those people. And so I think, I really lucked out with Seth Hewitt, with my asset manager when I was a leasing director, who took the time to explain the big picture financials to me, because that 100% changed the course of my career, my understanding of how the industry works and how I could impact it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's interesting as we've come, I haven't been in the front lines of our trainings with Resman, but I know when we first started, I was really surprised at the number of prospective customers. I really think most of it was more about prospective customers than ones that came on with us. So I was surprised to find there were people who still weren't willing to share the financials. And I remember early on, we had a request that they wanted to shield parts of the budget in our software from their front lines. And I never operated that way. I always believed in transparency. I figured it's a big elephant. I don't want to eat it by myself. I need everybody understanding what our goals are, and we're all working towards the same thing. So, early on, I was educated this way, so transparency was key. But you're exactly right, and think, that's all I want. I was surprised about that, because not knowing your budget to me was just, it blew my mind. And I don't know that there's people still out there doing this today, but if there are, well, that's disappointing. Because you're entrusting people to run a multi-million-dollar asset.
So let me share something.
Oh.
So I moved from operations into asset management. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the most uncomfortable transitions in my career. And this was in the last 5 years. Okay. I felt like a sitting duck walking into this gigantic boardroom full of asset managers who had their MBAs from Duke Fuqua, who'd worked at banks, who understood. I'm literally sitting there quietly Googling, like, what is a BIP? I'm like, oh, it's a basis point. I didn't I didn't know. These were shortcuts in words and phrases that I wasn't familiar with. And there was an attitude of, the operators are stupid. We know what's going on up here. We're going to give them this goal. We ran on two different budgets. We had our budget, and then we had the budget that we gave to the third-party property management teams. Now, the third-party property management teams knew that. So you've got all this work that's going back and forth. Mm-hmm. And I don't operate that way. And I would raise my hand and say, excuse me, I have a question, which did not make me any more popular. And that's fine. But I've got plenty of friends on my own. It's all good. But, really was super uncomfortable. And I remember being very self-conscious about it until I realized that's exactly why I got hired. I got hired to be the person that brought a different perspective into the room. I got hired to be maybe a little uncomfortable. I got hired to ask those questions. Mm-hmm. And I had the person that brought me into the company, Don McKenzie, was the director of development he was the director of development at UDR when I opened 399 Fremont, and brought me on at Forum. He'd moved over and became the president. And he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And he saw something in me that he thought, this person should be in an asset management role. This person has what it takes to get these lease ups run and to do something different. And he ended up leaving the company probably 6 months after I got there. And then he unexpectedly passed away about a year later. And I'm very sad. He's a titan in our industry and somebody very unique and passionate who brought his love of art and literature and history into real estate and his passion for his 3 beautiful daughters and his wife into everything that he did. And he wore slippers at work and had a oak bookcase in our very modern office. I mean, Don's a character, and somebody who really took time to mentor and really took time with people. And so I have a lot of gratitude for that. But I really thought I was doing a bad job for a while. And it turns out I wasn't doing a bad job. I was just doing a different job.
Mm-hmm. And uncomfortable.
I think I still struggle with, in my mind, being able to tell myself that I'm a good asset manager.
Why is that so? I know what you mean.
Because it's not the norm. Because the way that I look at things and the way that I do things is not how it has been. But it's changing drastically. I've seen in the last couple of months, former operators that I used to work with that are taking asset management and portfolio management roles in large companies, in large institutional companies. So this is changing drastically everywhere. And I think that it is changing. I think that our minds work against ourselves sometimes.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And I think that's not always a bad thing.
No, I think it's a good thing. But I also, it's funny when I think about like when it's time to think about session submissions because right now I'm very grateful to the industry and we have similar stories. I think about everybody, like people saw things in me before I saw them in myself. Mm-hmm. So I was always that person that I wish I could tell you I was like put myself out there and made things happen. The reality was I was that workhorse. I was the hard worker. And, but people saw something in me. And I think probably now after talking with you today, probably had a lot more to do with me asking questions. I asked a lot of questions.
Yes.
And it was because I guess what overshadowed my lack of confidence was my need to know why. So that helped pull me along. So I'm really grateful. It's probably why I'm so passionate about our products and the people in the space, because I feel like I am truly a product of it. And but I think about people who are coming up behind us and how do we help them, embrace and get past, imposter syndrome to some degree. I mean, it's kind of what we're talking about because it feels uncomfortable. But when somebody sees something in you, it's like finding that self-voice, and maybe your coaches helped with that. That's they put you there for a reason, and holding on to that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, and it's a new chapter and it's a new challenge. But I think that's what, and I'm reflecting now as we're talking in real time here about watching different people get promoted over the years, and even at Resman when I've seen people get promoted from within, because I'm happy to say we've done a lot of that. But you're right. There's this uncomfortable and almost a doubt that sometimes comes in pretty quickly for some people. And, just thinking about how you can push through that. And I think a lot of that probably comes with self-talk. And is that something your coaches helped you with, or did you?
Oh, yeah, tremendously. Okay. But it still happens. And here's the thing. It's not bad. And this phrase imposter syndrome isn't helping us. And I hope to figure out another way to name that voice, because typically when I have that moment, it's when I'm learning and doing something new. It's when I'm growing. So maybe it's a growth edge. Maybe that's...
Oh, I like that.
Maybe that's how you rename it, because we should be doing new things. We should be pushing boundaries and being uncomfortable. I think back to starting my career, and I would say I was probably in multifamily for 6 or 7 years before, like if I met somebody at a party when I was in my early 20s, what do you do? I'm an actress, right? I have a theater company. Because that was what my passion was. Everything else was a day job. And I did both for many, many years. And it took a long time for me to own the fact that I am an industry veteran. And I think it actually helped me because I came very humble to everything that I did, because I'm like, I'm just, I'm here trying to make monies to support my theater habit. And so I'm not the expert. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and I'm going to try to understand where you're coming from and the way that I have worked in my career and the way that that our company works, the one thing that I think makes us really special is that we take every client at face value and say, okay, what's your problem that you're coming to us with that you want help solving, or what are the things that you have questions about? We help define, because 9 times out of 10, what they come to us with isn't entirely the whole story. So we have a nice discovery process that we go through. And we really listen with an open mind and put together a team and a plan specific for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about me, Carol, being the expert that's going to help you do all this. It's me, Carol, having talked and listened to a ton of people in the industry and having all this information in my brain. And as you're talking and describing, going, ooh, this person can come in and do this. This person can come in and do this. This person, and building up that support structure to get you where you need to go.
Yeah.
That's how we like to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it can achieve some pretty phenomenal results.
Yeah. Well, I know I've heard you, like I said, your reputation precedes you. That's not a shameless plug. That's just a fact.
I will cop to that.
Yeah.
I'm very goal oriented and I love getting things done.
Yes, you do. So, well, I enjoyed this. I thank you so much for coming out and doing this with us. I really do. I was very much leaning in the whole time. So just a fantastic job. Just thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Well, I certainly hope that you enjoyed today's episode with our trailblazer, Carol Enoch. Be sure to subscribe to our Prop Talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. To learn more about Resmond's property management platform or to get more insight on multifamily, please visit us at myresmond.com. Thanks again, Carol.
Thank you.